But it seems like the only way they can ever turn this around is by really focusing on having great quality content. Only then can they bring back their audience and actually have a customer base to begin with. But so far it seems like Vice is just a ticking time bomb. With all the founders leaving, all of the old journalists leaving, all of the people that made it great gone, it's an almost impossible mission to make it profitable again.
Want to get into software development, data analytics, or IT and security? Well, do yourself a favor and grab this course on Udemy. Just a beginner in Python? What you don't know, you can learn it here and be ready for your first big break. All right, grab the course now.
About 6 months ago, I was sat in my living room. In this living room, lost in the endless, comforting embrace of TikTok's For You feed. I hadn't had the app very long at this point, and its algorithm was still trying to figure me out. It had tried immersing me in book talk videos, in clips of rich white guys crying on podcasts, and in endless footage of Taylor Swift concerts. Which, that last one wasn't so bad. But this particular afternoon, the algorithm decided that what I really needed to see was a steady stream of AI content. In fact, it must have been December 2022. Because following the release of DALL-E, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion in the spring and summer of that year, OpenAI had just unveiled its ChatGPT tool. And it was lighting up conversation across the internet. Opinion was pretty split. Some saw an innovation on the scale of the Gutenberg press or spinning Jenny. Others questioned the ethics of training these tools on the work of artists and writers who hadn't agreed to their ideas being used as training data. While some fantasized about whole professions being made obsolete, others mocked Midjourney's then inability to draw hands, or ChatGPT's tendency to just outright lie. On TikTok, or at least my TikTok, however, there was little dissent. Users were hyped, and there was a particular use case that they had in mind for these new tools.
There's an effortless way to use AI to make over $10,000 a month.
This may be the best way to make money with AI.
These 3 AI apps should be illegal, and if you use them correctly, you can make a lot of money.
ChatGPT doesn't really help you make money online, so here's 4 tools that will.
My first response was to very consciously try and swipe these videos away as quickly as possible in an effort to teach TikTok's algorithm that I wasn't actually all that interested in using AI to write computer-generated posts for my slightly shady, keyword-stuffed, affiliate link-infested health foods blog. This strategy had worked pretty well for stemming the flow of podcast clips, after all. But these over-enthusiastic financial freedom seekers had managed to plant something in my brain. In the days, weeks, and months since, my online feeds have continued to be peppered with posts boasting about how these new AI tools can be used to make a quick buck. Perhaps the weirdest part of this trend came when I opened up Notion, a task management app that we use to keep track of our various projects. When Notion began rolling out its Notion AI feature in February 2023, one feature jumped out at me. It was the option to highlight a piece of text and select Make Longer. Now, I've tried long and hard to think of a genuine, productive use case for such a function, and I just can't. No piece of text, whether it be a novel, a news report, or a corporate evaluation, has ever been made better by being gratuitously padded out to increase the word count. There's a reason that writers are instructed to kill your darlings, not force your darlings to multiply until a single pithy sentence has become an unwieldy mass of adverbs and adjectives. brevity is the soul of wit, long-windedness is the soul of online recipes which are trying to cram in as many keywords for search engine optimization as possible before just telling you how to make the damn lasagna. Taken together, it was hard not to find all of this a bit depressing. There are obviously plenty of ethical questions to be asked about how these AI tools are both trained and implemented. Nevertheless, one has to admit they're pretty impressive. There may be plenty of flaws to be ironed out, but the fact that I can just ask ChatGPT to write a scene from a stage play in which Albert Einstein argues with Bugs Bunny about who should get the kids after their divorce that's pretty cool, right? It was kind of depressing then, that faced with this new technology, with all kinds of possibilities for making people's lives easier and better, so much discursive space was being taken up by people for whom the real excitement lay in how it could be used to further automate their low-effort online grifts. Since noticing this, I haven't been able to stop thinking about the extent to which we increasingly seem to be surrounded by grifts. I reckon a good third of the ads that I get on YouTube are pitches for money-making schemes which sound a little too good to be believed. There have been weeks when I've seen this woman more than members of my actual family. Neither is it a surprise anymore when a friend brings up dropshipping or foreign exchange trading, or some other questionable investments. At the same time, there's been a big upswing in anti-grifter content. Whether it's Mike Winnett, or Dan Olson, or Mooncat, or CoffeeZilla, scam busting has become its own genre. We love to hear the juicy details of whatever scheme is currently fleecing the easily fooled. Whether we're among those actually getting caught up in these schemes, or whether we're simply watching on voyeuristically from the sidelines, then grifts, grifters, and grifting seem to have taken over. They are the zeitgeist. And so, I want to explore how it is that these low-rent, often cringe-inducing grifts gain such a stranglehold over us. We are gonna look a little bit at how some of these schemes work, but I'm mostly interested in why. What is it that's currently causing so many people to get caught out by the preponderance of so-called passive income gurus, and what is it that draws the rest of us in to watch? Because while most of these schemes and the swindlers which promote them might initially appear pretty small-time and marginal, I think they're actually pretty revealing about the world in which we live. It's certainly the case that you can learn a lot about a historical moment from the heroes it raises up. The biographies of figures like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Mark Zuckerberg certainly tell us a great deal about the social and economic system which has produced them. But one thing I've become convinced of during the 4 months or so that I've been working on this project is that you can learn even more about an era through examining its grifts.
There's an effortless way to use AI to make over $10,000 a month.
How I make $1,000 a day selling on Etsy.
ChatGPT doesn't really help you make money online.
This is how I plan to make
I'm going to show you how to make
Here are the 4 best passive income ideas.
Start making a passive.
These three AI
your friends
my favorite. These three AI These three AI
कोका कोला बॉटल पे दिए गए QR कोड को स्कैन करें और एक्सपीरियंस करें कोक स्टूडियो.
In order to contextualize the rise of the online grift, we first need to talk for a brief moment about the NBC sitcom The Office, which will make sense shortly, I promise. See, The Office premiered in the spring of 2005, which in hindsight was an interesting time to launch a show so explicitly focused on our relationship with work. As some of you might remember, that relationship was about to change significantly.
Lehman Brothers is going bankrupt, and financial markets from Asia to Europe are doing their utmost to prevent Monday from turning from dark to black.
But before we get to all of that, The Office. The Office exists in a tradition of comedies inspired by situations which, in the hands of a different writing team, might be framed as deeply tragic. Viewed through the eyes of the show's audience surrogate, Jim, the Scranton branch of Dunder Mifflin, is a kind of hell. It's not just that he's surrounded by some deeply strange colleagues, but that, on top of this, the work itself is kind of dystopian. When he's not getting involved in some classic comedy hijinks, Jim's job is to sell paper.
My job is to speak to clients on the phone about quantities and type of copy or paper. You know, whether we can supply it to them, whether they can pay for it, and I'm boring myself just talking about this.
It's not that businesses don't need paper. They do. And they have to buy it from somewhere. But paper is paper. And Dunder Mifflin doesn't even manufacture the paper it sells. They're just middlemen. If Jim and Pam and Michael and Dwight were to vanish from the face of the earth, their customers would barely even notice. They'd find a new supplier within minutes, and the world would keep on turning. Which, if you're Jim, has to be kind of depressing.
Right now, this is just a job. If I advance any higher in this company, then this would be my career. And, well, if this were my career, I'd have to throw myself in front of a train.
This kind of anxiety, that one might find oneself trapped in an unfulfilling and maybe even objectively pointless...
Hello, Sadhijas, how are you?
...was pretty widespread in the mid to late 2000s. It was best summed up a few years later by the anthropologist David Graeber in an article titled On the Phenomenon of Bullshit Jobs. Graeber wrote that it's as if someone were out there making up pointless jobs just for the sake of keeping us all working. Like Jim Halpert, many white-collar workers viewed their stable, reasonably well-compensated office jobs through the same lens that others would view a life sentence. It's against this backdrop that in 2007, the businessman, blogger, and future podcaster Tim Ferriss released this book, The 4-Hour Workweek. The 4-Hour Workweek didn't invent the online grift whole cloth. As Ferriss acknowledges, the book is essentially a
I'm sleepy,
making tips
but
already been floating around.
I'm having trouble sleeping,
But it
so I'm doing
was
this.
instrumental in bringing mainstream attention to a new set.
Let's try to meet Kal Parso. Are you free tomorrow?
Filthy rich, or at least trying to. The 4-Hour Workweek is pitched as a method for escaping the 9 to 5. And in this way, it responds to many of the same cultural anxieties about work as The Office. In Tim Ferriss's eyes, there are few fates worse than being a, quote, 3-piece zombie, or a high-paid coffee fetcher. In fact, as Ferriss sees it, it's not just bureaucratic, white-collar work which sucks. He writes that, for most people, somewhere between 6 and 7 billion of them, the perfect job is the one that takes the least time. The vast majority of people will never find a job that can be an unending source of fulfillment. Luckily, Ferriss has a way out of this hellscape of cubicles and coffee machines. Tim Ferriss's promise in the 4-Hour Workweek is, as the
Today and tomorrow? Yeah, we can figure something out.
help you whittle your working week
I'll message you in the morning.
40 hours to just 4. At the same time, he
Why are you awake right now?
increase your income
Sadhijas.
from, well, whatever it is now, to $40,000 plus per month. Or maybe $60,000 per month, or maybe $5,000 an hour. The exact figures seem to change from chapter to chapter, but the point is that you're gonna be rich. What's his plan for achieving this goal? Well, I don't think it would be doing the book justice if I didn't summarize things with the appropriate level of bravado and obnoxiousness. So, without further ado, let me explain. Hi, My name's Tom Nicholas, writer, video creator, entrepreneur. Welcome to my no-nonsense guide to Tim Ferriss's guide to escaping the
You owe me a meal? Why do you owe me a meal?
is free. Step 1. Number 1. Let's kick things off by boosting your productivity. See, Tim Ferriss reckons that a solid 50%
Oh yeah.
of your daily
You do owe me a meal. You came to our last draw jam, the one before this one, and you didn't pay.
All right. Well,
I remember now.
it's simple. Just don't do them. Non-urgent emails from colleagues?
Well, tentatively, let's meet at Lofology,
No, thank you.
F11.
Disciplinary meetings about your dismissive attitude? No, Messia. Congratulations. You just freed up at least half your time. And it was as simple as just...
Hello, Pengu Blues.
Step 2. Next up, you're going to convince your boss to let you work from home. This is probably going to be a whole bunch easier since the old Rona swept through town, am I right? Achoo! But our goal in working from home isn't just to avoid novel zoonotic diseases. No. You're going to leverage your newfound productivity to finish your day job in half the time it used to take. And guess what? We're going to use the rest of that time to embark on some
Alright, cool.
money-making ventures. In class.
Let's do it.
Sure, the HR department might call this something
I'll confirm when I wake up tomorrow, yeah?
gross misconduct or a breach of your contract. But Tim Ferriss prefers to call it liberation, which just sounds so much cooler. Step 3. It's time to start your very own business. But not just any business. You're going to focus in on creating a niche, product-based, direct-to-consumer sales business. Think Casper mattresses, or Allbirds, or Huel, the human fuel. The nicher, the better. How about a range of pasta sauces marketed specifically at dog walkers? Or letterboxes just for snowboarders? Actually, not those. Those were pretty good, actually. All you've got to do is set up a website to sell your new product, place a few ads on Google and in niche hobbyist magazines, and wait for the sales to come rolling in. Which they definitely will, because you're a bloody legend to whom only good things happen. Step 4. Now get this for a stroke of genius. With a few neat tricks, you're going to completely automate your new business, transforming it into a magical money-making machine. C'est magnifique! You're going to use a specialist manufacturer who's able to make each order on demand and ship it direct to your customers. And when it comes to those mind-numbing admin tasks, boring! You're going to hire a bunch of cheap virtual assistants in the global south. Which is, all fine, and there is no ethical questions to be asked about at all. Please don't ask any ethical questions. Assuming nothing goes wrong, which, why would it? You've now got yourself a completely automated business which only takes minimal levels of effort to maintain. Voila! Step 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Clean lines, thank you. They're not so clean, but thank you.
Congratulations! You're now a super successful businessman. Or like, person, I guess. It's time to wave goodbye to that boring old day job. Au revoir! Oh, and now you're gonna move to Asia. Why, you ask? Well, yeah, this bit might seem a little random. But look, even if you follow the 4-hour workweek plan down to the letter, your business is only going to rake in a measly $480,000 a year. Or, if we adjust for inflation since the book was published, a paltry, $877,000 a year. Which, what are you, some kind of street urchin? You deserve the rock star lifestyle, my friend. And that means moving to a low-income country where favorable exchange rates will allow you to live like a king. Although Ferriss actually suggests that we should avoid, all countries in Africa, the Middle East, or Central and South America, excepting Costa Rica and Argentina. So I guess you better start learning Thai. If you manage to conquer these 5 steps, and the many dozens of sub-steps, then congratulations! You are now a member of the new rich. See you on the beach, because the beers are on you. Have a interessante! As you've probably already gathered, Tim Ferriss's tendency is to present his money-making model as entirely foolproof. There's little acknowledgement anywhere within the book that any part of his multi-stage plan could ever go wrong. Even if it does, he has a pretty blasé attitude to the potential consequences. In the section where he encourages readers to negotiate a remote working contract with their employer, he writes that, "If you jump ship or get fired, it isn't hard to eliminate most expenses temporarily and live on savings for a brief period. From renting out your home to refinancing or selling it, there are options. There are always options." At which point I have to remind you that this book was published in 2007.
Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate.
As with any business, there are, of course, all kinds of ways in which this plan might fail. But the biggest gap in Ferriss's scheme is also the most important thing for a product-based business to get right. See, Ferriss has the tendency to get lost in the weeds of some fairly unimportant parts of his plan, which, you know, I can relate. This is a book which goes into minute detail about how and when you should check your emails. It gives you scripted suggestions for how to convince your boss to let you work from home. It even finds space for a series of confidence-building challenges, one of which involves randomly lying face down in the middle of the street to, I don't know, learn how to assert dominance or something. But for a book which presents itself as an all-encompassing method for leveraging a product-based business to get filthy rich, there is precious little advice on how to conceive of the product itself. The few ideas Ferriss does suggest are absolutely terrible. One is that you license an already existing product and put your own label on it, similar to what supermarkets do with own brand cereal. But this not only means entering a market which probably has a considerable amount of competition, it likely also means sacrificing a huge chunk of your potential profit to the licenser. Ferriss's other suggestion is that you write a book. But don't worry if you don't really have any useful knowledge to share with the world. You can always, quote, create the content yourself, often via paraphrasing and combining points from several books on a topic. Or if that seems too hard for you, you can simply repurpose content that is in the public domain and not subject to copyright protection. So, essentially selling PDFs of Moby Dick. In summary, the 4-hour workweek might be, as its blurb suggests, a step-by-step guide to living the life of your dreams. But given that the most important step is to simply, found HelloFresh, none of it's particularly achievable. At risk of sounding like a McKinsey consultant or something, if you want to make nearly $900,000 a year in profit, having a half-decent product is probably kind of important. This all might seem like a terrible oversight, but to Tim Ferriss, not caring about the product you're selling is kind of the point. In probably the worst paragraph of a deeply terrible book, Tim Ferriss asks, can a business be used to change the world, like The Body Shop or Patagonia? Yes, but that isn't our goal here. Our goal is simple, to create an automated vehicle for generating cash without consuming time. That's it. And this is the legacy of the 4-hour workweek. Reading the book in 2023, it was interesting to note how many different online subcultures Ferriss inspired. Every productivity guru you see on YouTube, every minimalism evangelist, every van life lover or digital nomad owes at least something to Tim Ferriss. But it's this idea that one can build a completely hands-off, automated business that simply deposits cash into your bank account at the end of the month that has had the most impact. It would be entirely fair to describe Ferriss's plan as a get-rich-quick scheme. but it would be more accurate to describe it as a get-rich-easy scheme. The emphasis is far less on the speed with which this model will guide you to wealth than it is on the lack of effort you'll have to put in. Ferris refers to this as developing income autopilot, or management-free money. The phrase that's really taken off, however, is passive income. In the 15 years since Ferris released the 4-hour workweek, the dream of building so-called passive income streams is one which has spread far and wide. For those who seek what enthusiasts call financial freedom, there are a whole range of different schemes available, and thousands upon thousands of self-appointed gurus willing to teach you how. Before we take a look at how some of these schemes function, however, we first need to acknowledge the event. On the 15th of September 2008, the New York-based investment bank Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. After 150 years of continuous operation, a series of high-risk gambles in the subprime mortgage market had failed spectacularly and left it fatally short of cash. With several other major global banks experiencing similar crises during the course of that year, things looked bleak. The complete collapse of the global financial system was only held off through unprecedented government action, with the US, the UK, and the European Union effectively nationalising huge chunks of their banking sectors. Watching that now infamous footage of Lehman Brothers employees being unceremoniously deposed from their towering glass palace in Times Square, it might initially have been tempting to revel in the schadenfreude. Investment bankers don't exactly tend to attract much sympathy. Nevertheless, as the global economy plunged into recession, job losses and layoffs became a reality across industries and sectors. According to the International Monetary Fund, the financial crisis pushed around 30 million people out of their jobs. The unemployment rate in the US peaked at 10%. And while the recession itself was officially declared over in the US in June 2009, it took until 2017 for unemployment rates to dip back to pre-crash levels. As important as the sheer number of jobs, however, is how the crash affected the types of jobs on offer. If we stay focused on America for a moment, we find that around 60% of jobs lost during the Great Recession were mid-wage positions, paying between $13 and $22 an hour. These were real estate agents, office managers, and higher-skilled tradespeople. When firms started hiring again, the majority of new posts on offer were both less well remunerated and less secure. These were jobs in retail, catering, and care. There was a whole universe of work which kind of just didn't exist anymore. For many, even having a job was no longer enough. With real-term wages falling year on year, some took on additional work in the burgeoning gig economy. Others put their skills to work by embarking on so-called side hustles. But these dire economic circumstances also opened the door to the further popularization of the online grift. Some clarification might be useful here, because we tend to use the terms grift and grifter pretty loosely. Some use them to describe full-on fraudsters such as Bernie Madoff and Sam Bankman-Fried. Others throw the term at contrarian and conspiracist political commentators, who seem to court controversy in order to shift dubious brain pills and mugs. None of these are wrong, obviously. I'm not the word police. But for today's purposes, I'm interested in a particular kind of grift, because blowhards and con artists are fairly eternal. The difference between 19th century snake oil salesman Clark Stanley and Theranos CEO Elizabeth Holmes is primarily one of aesthetics. But in popularizing the idea that it might be possible to create an almost completely automated source of income, Tim Ferriss planted the seed for a new kind of grift, which was much more of our time. The 4-hour workweek itself hasn't aged particularly well. And I don't mean it's deeply sexist or anything. Although, there's some bits. Ask for the phone numbers of at least 2 attractive members of the opposite sex on each day. Girls, this means you're in the game as well. And it doesn't matter if you're over 50. Oh boy. With its strong emphasis on telephone sales and earnest recommendations of tools like Skype, it's just clearly written for a different era. Luckily for those seeking to make their fortune, however, countless new schemes have popped up in its wake, which similarly promise to set you up with a reliable source of passive income. And again, I don't think I'd really be doing them justice if I didn't introduce them with the appropriate level of enthusiasm. Waha! Guess who's back? The name's Tom Nicholas. T to the N to the Nicholas. Writer. Video creator. Verified hustler. A little birdie tells me that you've been looking for more ways to make money online. And boy oh boy do I have some ideas for you. In this, my non-exhaustive list of online grifts. Money-making opportunities. Strategy 1. Drop shipping. Drop. Drop shipping is the classic passive income stream. It allows you to sell real physical products to real physical customers without any of the hassle of ordering or storing or shipping those products yourself. Ooh la la! Here's how it works. Step 1. Get yourself over to a budget online marketplace like AliExpress. Have a little scroll around and find yourself a red-hot product. Something you reckon will just fly out the window given half the chance. I've got my eye on this cute little duck necklace. It's fun. It's cute. It also happens to only be 49p. Step 2. Next up, you're going to want to create an online store, showcasing this super cheap bit of produce. You want to crack out all the persuasive writing and design skills you can muster to make your product irresistible. I simply can't resist. Write about how ducks are symbolic of, like, love. And spiritual evolution. Evolution? Like eggs and stuff. Eggs. Step 3. This is where the fun begins. See, you don't want the risk of having to buy and store a bunch of these cheap, unique necklaces. Nor do you want to have to deal with shipping them to the plebs who buy them. So, you're going to set things up on the back end so that when anyone purchases anything from your website, it simply forwards their order on to AliExpress, who will take care of all that nonsense for you. Cheers, Ali. You're my best friend. Be sure to charge a handsome markup for all this hard work. I think we could call this 20 quid, don't you? I certainly do, Tom. I certainly do. Strategy 2. Affiliate marketing. This one's another classic online money-making model. And all it requires is that you have the ability to spit out paragraphs and paragraphs of engaging prose. Step 1. Create a blog. You want this blog to focus on reviewing and otherwise discussing products. Preferably medium to high ticket items such as barbecues. Gas-powered barbecues. Because who doesn't love a good grill session, am I right? Make sure to write all of your posts with search engine optimization in mind. We're talking how-to articles. We're talking listicles. We're talking product comparisons. Sign up to an affiliate marketing program. An affiliate marketing program is a scheme in which an online store will give you a set of custom links to products on their site. If anyone purchases a product after following your link, then you'll get a sweet little kickback of sometimes up to 20%. Personally, I choose to become an affiliate of the world's biggest retailer, Amazon. Cheers, Jeff! Nice stuff! Litter your blog with those magical affiliate links. Any mention of a product should be a link. Any picture of a product, also an affiliate link. Keep going until as many words as possible are that beautiful hyperlink blue. Drive those conversions, you bloody legend! Now all you gotta do is sit back and wait for some loser to stumble upon your blog, click through to Amazon and buy one of these things, and you can stop, drop, and start rolling in those flame-grilled millions. Strategy 3. Retail arbitrage. Arbitrage? Despite its fancy pants name, this one's so simple that even I understand it. Yes! Although unfortunately, it is going to involve going outside. Boo! Step 1. Roll on down to your local out-of-town shopping centre or discount store. Get your little peepers out and browse the aisles for any products which are on sale or which look like they might be a little underpriced. This was down to just 150 quid. Step 2. Once you've got a little dealio in your sights, you're going to want to pull out your phone and download the Amazon Seller app. You can use this app to scan the barcode of the product in front of you, and in return, it'll tell you how much that item is currently selling for on Amazon. If the Amazon price is higher than the store price, then congratulations! Looks like you've managed to find yourself a cheeky bit of profit, my friend. I'm so proud of you! Get loading up that trolley with as many units as it will handle. I've got 28 of these things in my living room. Step 3. Sign up as an Amazon seller and register for their Fulfilled by Amazon service. This lets you send your haul to Amazon, who will store it for you and then ship it to whoever buys it. And all for just a tiny fee. Thanks again, Jeff. Strategy 5. If all else fails, why not become an expert? What are those scare quotes doing there? Can we get rid of those, please? The internet thrives on content. The more words that are spaffed into this thing, the better. And there is sweet, sweet money to be made in being a content spaffer. Step 1. Pick yourself a topic to be an expert in. Try and think of something that people aren't just interested in, but desperate to know about. How to be productive. How to be YouTube famous. How to get rich. How to get laid. So cool. Step 2. If you already know how to get laid or whatever, then you are good to go. But if, maybe you, don't, then that doesn't matter either. Tap up your old friend, Professor Google. Read a few blogs, watch a few videos, and congratulations! You've just got yourself a PhD from the University of Internet. Step 3. It's time to start cooking up some content. Blogs, YouTube videos, obnoxious Twitter threads, non-exhaustive lists. It's all good. And if you ever get a little stuck, just have a look at some high-performing posts by other experts and paraphrase those. Step 4. Once you've managed to lure in some underconfident teenagers, dedicated readers, now's the time to start earning some money. Yes, I love it. I'm talking ads on your posts. I'm talking ebooks. I'm talking courses. I'm talking rephrasing all the stuff that's available for free on all your platforms, but for an upfront fee. Fantastica! Okay, I think that's quite enough of that. My senses hurt. This is but a tiny, tiny taste of the plethora of passive income schemes which have emerged over the past decade. As you can see, they vary pretty wildly in their approach. Perhaps my favourite suggestion involves investing in vending machines. You know, as if they don't cost a bunch of money and break pretty easily. It's also funny how some of these schemes seem to just come full circle to just inventing a normal business again. Nevertheless, these schemes all share the same goal. Like Ferris's formula in the 4-hour work week, they promise a path to generating a consistent income, and usually a pretty high income, in return for minimal levels of effort. Again, these are get-rich-quick schemes, but the real emphasis is on getting rich easily. Many of these schemes exist in a kind of legal and ethical grey area. They seem to tacitly encourage some pretty shady practices in a way that more traditional business models just don't. Affiliate marketers will clearly benefit from forgetting to disclose their use of paid referral links. A wannabe dropshipper browsing AliExpress for products will quickly find themselves tempted by unlicensed or counterfeit goods. Nevertheless, breaking the law is seldom a requirement of any of these schemes. They pretty much all can be employed in ways that are completely legit. And most of the gurus who provide advice on them benefit from existing in this strange area of plausible deniability. What's really interesting though is that even when they are carried out in entirely legal ways, they still feel kinda icky. As much as these are technically businesses like any other, most of us would act pretty differently to a friend announcing that they were about to start reselling air fryers on Amazon than we would if they said they were going to start a ballet school or window cleaning company or something. They just feel off. And it's this sense of ickiness which holds the key to understanding not only why these schemes have become popular, but why these particular schemes have become popular at this particular moment in time. Because when we dive into these bad vibes, we actually begin to find some pretty solid links between these low-rent grifts and some much more mainstream trends within our economy. Long video, right? Got to keep my carbs up. In chapter 5 of the 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss introduces a concept known as the Pareto principle. As he explains it, this is the idea that 80% of the results of a given project or activity come from 20% of the effort and time that's put into it. This sometimes gets called the 80-20 rule. Largely thanks to Ferriss, the Pareto principle has become something of an unacknowledged cliché among time management nerds. If you scroll through the back catalogue of any wannabe productivity guru on YouTube, you're bound to find at least one video about it in there somewhere. Perhaps unsurprisingly, most of these gurus actually have a pretty shaky understanding of the principle itself. As Ferriss does in the 4-hour work week, they tend to assume that it means you can simply identify which 20% of your daily tasks lead to 80% of your desired outcomes, and then kind of bin off everything else. This, however, is wishful thinking. Firstly, assuming there is some truth to this idea, it's often only possible to identify which of your tasks constitute that vital 20% after a project is completed. For example, I wrote several drafts of the script to this video before I got it to a place where I was happy with it. I reckon that at least 80% of my time was technically wasted writing words which ultimately got binned or tweaked in some way. But I didn't write those earlier drafts knowing that they were gonna be thrown out. It's only in hindsight that I can tell you which sections made the final cut. In fact, who's to say that this section will? I mean, it has. I'm filming it. Secondly, just because a task isn't directly related to your core outcomes doesn't necessarily mean that you can simply not do it. Every month or so, I have to sit down in front of some accounting software and categorise all the money that we've spent on costume and props and filming kit and wages and Blender assets and software and subscriptions, etc, etc. This task certainly isn't one of the 20% of tasks which leads to my videos getting more views or more people signing up to support the channel on Patreon. at patreon.com/Tom Nicholas. Always be hustling. Nevertheless, having all my receipts and stuff together so that I can submit my taxes at the end of the year does keep me out of prison, which is, nice. The Pareto principle, then, can certainly be a useful evaluation tool or thought experiment. It can almost certainly help you be a bit more efficient with your time. But it's not some all-powerful life hack which is going to set you on the path to working just 4 hours a week. I'm not only bringing this up as another excuse to dunk on Tim Ferriss, although the sheer silliness of this book has infested my brain. I mention it instead because the Pareto principle is named after this guy, the 19th century economist and polymath Vilfredo Pareto. And it's not the only concept which borrows his name. There's another idea named for Pareto, which I think offers a really useful way into unpacking why passive income schemes are so appealing to those who attempt them, and why they can feel so icky to the rest of us. It's called Paretian rent. Now, I'm aware that the phrase Paretian rent sounds pretty technical, and I'll be honest with you, we are about to do a little bit of learning. But to keep things interesting, I thought I'd borrow a trick from The Big Short and hand over to Margot Robbie in a bathtub to explain. Here we go, Margot. What do you mean you can't make it? I've had this in the diary for ages. I've already run the bath. Look, I'm about as happy about this as you are. So, Paretian rent. Most of you are probably already far too familiar with the concept of rent as we use it in everyday conversation. You've likely handed over huge sums of money in rent payments to landlords over the course of your life. And unless you've got a thing for being financially dominated, which, to each their own, you've probably come to resent those payments. In fact, there's something about paying rent which seems to hurt so much more than other essential outgoings. Over the past 3 years, prices have been increasing on pretty much everything, from food to electronics to fuel. And yet, I rarely see memes comparing grocery store owners or smartphone manufacturers to leeches. Landlords and the rent which they take attract a special kind of hatred. Of course, part of this is that rent is expensive, and only getting more so. The average private renter in the UK spends 26% of their income on rent. In London, that figure is 40%. Those figures are from before inflation went through the roof too, so they're probably a little bit generous. Nevertheless, I don't think that the widespread hatred of landlords is just down to rent being expensive. I think it's more than that. Because paying rent doesn't only involve parting with more money than you'd like. It involves parting with more money than you'd like to someone who doesn't seem to have done all that much to earn it. Food and phone bills and fuel might all be more expensive than they could or should be. But at least when you're tucking into a bowl of Weetabix crispy minis, you know that some work has gone into making them exist. Someone had to grow the wheat and the cocoa and perform whatever magic happens in the factory to process them into those beautiful little packs of chocolatey goodness. When you watch the rent leave your bank account, however, it's hard to escape the feeling that your landlord has done very, very little to earn that cash. If they've hired a letting agent to oversee the property, there might be months when they completely forget that they own your property at all. What might surprise you is that economists also hate rent. They might use the term in reference to a much broader set of financial exchanges than the rest of us are used to, but it's always with the same sense of contempt. When an economist uses the phrase economic rent, or describes a person or company as being engaged in rent-seeking behaviour, that is proper claws-out stuff. And the reason that economists dislike rent is for much the same reason as tenants do. There are a handful of ways of defining economic rent. But the broadest is what's sometimes known as Paretian rent. The Penguin Dictionary of Economics describes this as the difference between the return made by a factor of production and the return necessary to keep the factor in its current occupation. But in slightly simpler language, it essentially refers to excess profit. Or maybe more specifically, unearned profit. To say that a company or a person is in receipt of an economic rent is to say that they are receiving a level of income from a particular economic activity which is in excess of that which is reasonable in relation to the time and effort and resource they are putting in. Now, I'm sure there's more than one person who is currently watching this video who is cracking their knuckles and preparing to write something along the lines of, "All profit is unearned, you absolute drongo!" That would have sounded better if Margot had been here to say it. She's Australian. And yes, this is broadly true. By its very definition, making a profit involves getting more out of an economic activity than you put in. But within the justifying logic of capitalism, some profit is viewed as necessary to motivate people to do stuff, to start businesses, develop new products, and improve upon existing ones. From this perspective, that profit is earned by someone being willing to take the risk of that business or product falling flat on its face. The point at which a profit margin turns into an economic rent, then, is the point at which it begins to exceed the amount necessary to provide that motivation. Say, for example, I could sell these cute little duck necklaces for £10, and in doing so would make enough profit that I would remain motivated to continue selling more. If I were then to begin selling those necklaces for £20, I would be claiming an economic rent of £10 on each necklace sold. Now, if most of us wanted to criticise someone for charging an excess profit, we'd probably do so on the basis of it feeling a little exploitative towards the customer. And we'll come back to this idea in a moment. But the real beef that many economists have with economic rents is that they're unproductive. Again, within the justifying logic of capitalism, a quote-unquote normal level of profit is productive. It promotes someone to create or sell a product or service they otherwise might not have, and therefore it has consequences for both the economy and society. Because of that normal profit margin, a thing now exists which previously didn't. An economic rent, however, has no such impact. The product or service would have been made or performed anyway. A person or company which is in receipt of an economic rent, then, is essentially getting money for nothing. Landlords are the ultimate example of this. See, we often overlook the fact that most landlords are actually engaged in two separate economic activities. The first is real estate speculation. They've bought a house or a flat in the hope that it will increase in value over time and that they'll later be able to sell it on at a profit. Outside of cases in which the landlord undertakes a major renovation, this kind of speculation might itself be viewed as a kind of rent seeking. This is an entirely unproductive activity. Neither the economy nor society benefits from some boomer uncle hoarding a house for a decade. Nevertheless, the presence of economic rent is even clearer when we look at the second activity that landlords are involved in. That, of course, is the letting out of their property. The rent that a landlord receives in return for allowing a tenant to live in their property is very clearly unproductive, because this rent is not a reward for doing anything at all. It is simply a reward for owning something. Even when a landlord can be persuaded to do maintenance on a property, to fix a leaky pipe or whatever, this isn't really a service performed in return for your rent check. If they're repairing something that you broke, then you can bet they're going to charge you for it. If the problem they're fixing is the result of wear and tear, then they're really just making that repair for their own benefit, ensuring that their property will retain its value as a speculative asset.
I guess if we're being really generous, we could acknowledge that landlords in some countries are required to ensure that certain gas and electrical safety tests are up to date. And I guess that's a kind of service they're providing. Outside of this, however, the rent that you pay to a landlord is just that, economic rent. Nothing about the process of one person owning a house and charging someone else to live in it is economically or socially productive. Landlords do not create anything new, and any resources that they expend in maintenance are in relation to their speculative activity, not in relation to their rental activity. Landlords are quite literally extracting a bunch of money whilst contributing nothing in return. If we wanted to find a more friendly phrase to replace the slightly formal sounding economic rent, then passive income wouldn't actually be a bad shout. But that's enough from me, Margot Robbie. To help apply some of these ideas to online grifts, I'd better pass you back to Tom.
Really looking forward to filming that bit. I think that's going to be fun, to work with a real actor for a change. It's going to be good. Okay, so it would be a stretch to classify all passive income schemes as pure rent-seeking operations. Because outside of actually becoming a landlord, which does appear fairly frequently on lists of recommended ventures, a lot of these schemes have the potential to sometimes be at least mildly economically productive. If we wanted to be super duper generous, we could view setting up a dropshipping store as a kind of marketing or branding. By placing a product in a slightly more appealing context than the horror show that is AliExpress, a dropshipper potentially facilitates a sale which otherwise wouldn't have taken place. Even something as instinctively silly as buying products in a shop to resell them on Amazon can be viewed as a productive process of reallocating resources from somewhere that they're in low demand, and thus on sale, to somewhere that they're in higher demand. The problem is that the tiny percentage of dropshippers or arbitrageurs, which is a real word, who are having these kinds of meaningful impacts are almost certainly putting in a huge amount of time and effort. They're continuously refining product descriptions or doing deep analysis on Amazon trends. And isn't the whole point of a passive income scheme meant to be that it's, well, passive? A lot of passive income gurus like to have it both ways. When either their critics or aggrieved followers question why so few people actually end up getting rich through these methods, they'll claim that passive income is really just a branding term, and that if you're not getting rich, it's because you're not working hard enough. Take this guy, Mark Tilbury, a finance guru from the UK who's closing in on 2 million subscribers on YouTube. In 2020, he posted a video in which he leveled with his audience and explained that making a success of any of these passive income business models will likely require a lot of hard work and discipline. But ease is central to the way that these same gurus pitch their strategies to new recruits. The pinned video on Mark Tilbury's channel at time of recording this segment opens with this line.
The biggest lie young people are told when they're 18, 19 and 20 is money doesn't grow on trees.
However much effort it takes to actually make a success of one of these passive income schemes, and whatever impact they might accidentally end up having on the wider economy, the goal is absolutely one of rent seeking. The explicit aim of this community is to find sneaky ways of extracting profit whilst avoiding any involvement in any meaningful, real, productive activity. The ickiness which many people feel towards these gurus and their followers then comes from the same place as that which feeds the current backlash against landlords. On the most basic level, it's a hostility towards people whose sole goal in life is to find loopholes which allow them to get rich whilst giving as little back to society as possible in return. But more than this, It's an anger at people whose path to wealth often involves actively making our economy and society less efficient and thus less pleasant places to live. Like landlords, passive income seekers can only thrive by creating unnecessary bloat in the online economy. Dropshippers and arbitrageurs have the effect of inflating the cost of goods and services. Affiliate marketers and fake experts create a slightly different kind of bloat, in which the internet gets flooded with fake reviews and soulless filler content, which make the web a worse place to be. Of course, this drive to get rich easy, no matter what effect it has on others, is, in some ways, eternal. It's the same motivation which leads people to gamble, to buy stocks, or to join multi-level marketing schemes. Nevertheless, I think there's something about this current wave of passive income business model which is a bit more specific to the present day. And as my various allusions to landlordism and economic rent throughout this section perhaps hint, it lies in the way that these seemingly marginal online grifts mirror powerful trends which run to the very heart of our economy. Special delivery. It's more ideas. Delicious, nutritious ideas. There's probably a much lazier version of this video, which ends with me sagely pontificating that the attempt of passive income seekers to make bank from very little work mirrors the way in which capitalists worldwide live off their investments, whilst everyone else is forced to work for a living. And that isn't untrue, but the rise of passive income culture actually mimics a much more specific trend in the corporate world. We've already acknowledged one way in which the global financial crisis of 2008 contributed to the rise of the passive income movement. It's really no surprise that the decade and a half of stagnant wages which followed the crash created an eager audience for gurus trying to sell easy answers. But truly understanding why these particular schemes have become popular at this particular moment in time necessitates reviewing those same events from a slightly different perspective. That of the lucky entrepreneurs who were able to use the crisis to make their billions. See, just under a year prior to the collapse of Lehman Brothers, a pair of flatmates in San Francisco registered the domain airbedandbreakfast.com. The corporate legend is that their landlord had raised their rent, and in need of some extra cash, they decided to set up some airbeds in their loft and let them out to people attending business conferences in the city. The venture was a success, and over the next few years, founders Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia gradually began to invite more and more people to list rooms on their sites. In an era of economic downturn, the website, quickly renamed Airbnb, seemed like a pretty good deal for both guests and hosts. The former were able to travel for cheaper, whilst the latter were able to earn an extra bit of cash. In those heady early days, journalists began to write pretty warmly of what they called the sharing economy. This banner not only encompassed Airbnb, but a plethora of other websites and apps launched in the years surrounding the financial crisis. TaskRabbit, Fiverr, JustPark, Lending Club, Kickstarter, Postmates, Uber, Deliveroo. Across their various different industries, commentators celebrated the way in which these sites seem to facilitate a direct, so-called peer-to-peer exchange between individuals in need of a service and those with the capacity to provide it. There were two problems with this view, though. The first was that, whilst these services often pitched themselves as ways for private individuals to make an extra bit of cash on the side, most quickly became professionalised. Airbnb soon became dominated by full-time landlords. Uber driver became a job like any other. The collaborative mirage of the sharing economy faded away and left in its place the back-breaking realities of the gig economy. The second problem was that the connections forged between Airbnb hosts and their guests, and Uber drivers and riders, weren't really peer-to-peer. Because the websites and apps which made these exchanges possible were not passive facilitators. They were private companies, often up to their eyeballs in venture capital money and in pursuit of ways to turn their sudden popularity into profit. To some, the new business model represented by these companies might have looked a little odd. In 2015, Tom Goodwin wrote an article for TechCrunch in which he observed that Uber, the world's largest taxi company, owns no vehicles. Facebook, the world's most popular media owner, creates no content. Alibaba, the most valuable retailer, has no inventory, and Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. That these companies have become so successful seemed to turn some of the most fundamental principles of capitalism on its head. You see, in theory, the thing which elevates a company within capitalism is its ownership and control over the means of production, by which we usually mean the physical assets and machinery which allow a particular industry to function. But this new breed of company didn't seem all that interested in owning the tools of their trade. Uber was quite happy for drivers to own their own vehicles. Fiverr never felt the need to force copywriters or artists working through the site to use Fiverr-owned laptops. In fact, these companies didn't seem to thrive in spite of their lack of physical assets, but because of it. But I guess if we're going to introduce a new business model, we better do it with the appropriate level of panache. Boom, boom, boom! It's your boy, Tom Nicholas. Writer, video creator, titan of industry. I'm here with another money-making scheme to fatten up those wallets. Sure, I've got my wallet here, but I'm going to warn you. This one's for the big-time ballers only. Ballers. I call it the platform. The platform comes in all shapes and sizes. Shops, networking, video streaming. You name it, there's a platform for it. And if you play your cards right, running the platform can be a great way to make a shed load of money whilst leaving the hard work to some other sucker. Sorry, suckers. Step 1. Have a gander for an industry that's a little too confusing or expensive for your average consumer. Maybe it's yet to embrace the full potential of communications technology, or maybe it's plagued by nuisances such as competition and workers' rights. I'm talking taxis. I'm talking selling handmade crafts. I'm talking music, audiobooks, online video sharing. Step 2. Build yourself an app which brings some order to this chaos. Trust me, you'll be fine. Most large children can build apps these days. Focus on making your product as flash and trendy as possible. These ain't your granddad's hotels, or taxis, or TV shows. These are hotels and taxis and TV shows for the internet generation. Click. Step 3. Sign up users who want to make some extra cash through your app. Present it as the ultimate side hustle opportunity. This isn't work. This is the sharing economy, baby! The trick is to make sure that all the real work is gonna fall on your users. In using their own cars and properties and filmmaking gear, they're also gonna take the brunt of the risk too. Well, all you have to do is maintain a silly little app. Step 4. Solicit some big-time venture capital investment. This is going to give you the ability to subsidize the cost of products or services through your app. Sure, for a little while you're going to be burning through cash, but it's all part of the master plan. Because by undercutting everyone else on the market, you're going to make yourself irresistible to potential customers and ensure anyone who wants to make money in your industry just has to use your app. Step 5. Once you've reached peak popularity, that's the point in which you can start cashing in. Cha-ching! On the one hand, you can start easing up on the subsidies. Gradually start ratcheting up prices on customers until you're on your way to turning a tidy profit. On the other hand, begin reducing the amount you pay out to folks providing services through your platform. As long as you've made yourself popular enough, both customers and service providers won't have any choice but to stick around. And that's it. Before you know it, you'll be raking it in. And the best part is that all the real work and all the risk sits firmly on the shoulders of your users. Now that's what I call passive income. What these new platform companies realized then was that owning the physical assets, which we traditionally think of as the means of production, isn't always the most important thing. In fact, a lot of assets can be a pain for a business to own. Cars consistently go down in value the longer that you own them. Laptops become outdated. In the tourism industry, even something as secure in value as property can be a nightmare. Destinations go in and out of fashion or are only profitable during certain seasons. Whether by accident or design, companies in industries as varied as transport, news, tourism, gaming, TV, and computer software came to realize that one could build a much more lightweight, flexible, responsive business model by avoiding the hassle of actually providing services in favor of simply positioning themselves as intermediaries between service providers and their customers. The similarities between these platform companies and many of the online grifts we've been looking at are striking. Much like dropshippers, affiliate marketers, or Amazon arbitrageurs, these companies play a pretty marginal role in their respective industries. When we really...
Shapuba, hello. You are the girl we met in
really just digital versions of the yellow
Wolfology.
plus a payment feature. They play a part in the process, but it would be ridiculous to suggest that the money that they take is justified by what they contribute. Uber takes a 25% cut from every ride arranged through its app. Fiverr takes 20% of both fees and tips. Postmates takes between 15% and 30% of an order's value from restaurants and 20% of the delivery from the person delivering an order. The idea that maintaining an app justifies a company taking such a huge slice of the pie is ludicrous. To make matters worse, the people who provide services through these platforms are forced to take on nearly all of the associated risk. If ridership is down 1 month, then Uber is certainly gonna notice, but not as much as its drivers, who are not only not earning, but are also on the hook for insurance and upkeep, and probably for car loan repayments too. On a purely aesthetic level then, online passive income grifts might seem pretty marginal. From their overall vibe, you'd expect them to have more in common with some guy selling fake trainers down the market than with Silicon Valley startup culture. And yet, their underlying business models are pretty similar. When explaining the concept of rent-seeking, the economist Robert Shiller likes to draw on the example of a feudal lord who places a chain across a river and demands a fee from passing boats in return for lowering the chain. He writes that there is nothing productive about the chain or the collector. The Lord has made no improvements to the river and is helping nobody in any way, directly or indirectly, except himself. None of the examples that we've been looking at are quite this bad, but they're not a million miles off. Many platform companies increasingly function as gatekeepers. Where one previously might have ordered a takeaway directly from a restaurant, now Deliveroo or Uber Eats has installed its chain between customer and vendor and expects to be rewarded for lowering it. A lot of online grifts seem to hope for a similar scenario. Those that we've been looking at in particular are predicated on inserting oneself as an additional intermediary in a sales process in order to simply siphon off some of the proceeds. But there's one glaring difference between online grifters and
How is Thailand, Ali
and
Hamza?
that is that these large companies are pretty successful. If we take a look at a list of the 10
How am I doing
companies
this?
in the world
With a
by
pen,
market
as always,
capitalization,
Ali Hamza.
we find that 6 derive a meaningful amount of their revenue from operating as platforms. Yeah, it seems fairly accepted, even within the passive income community, that most people who try out the various business models being hawked by financial freedom gurus fail spectacularly. If the business models which these gurus offer have those of the most successful companies,
You're talking about the fact that you can see my
Why is
face over here,
passive income
and you can see, okay, my face is over here, I don't know,
work
you see it?
smaller scale.
You see my face? And the fact that there's a video playing over here, this is what you're talking about?
Thank you.
I disappear and I go underground, but I learn stuff, Ali Hamza. I'm doing it because I figured out a lot about OBS. I don't know if you know what OBS is, but I figured out a bunch of things about OBS, and yeah. So this is a very complicated kind of setup in OBS. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to rejoin the world, Hamza. Let's see if I manage to do it. Dude, you're so talented. Namra from Burning Brownie tonight. Hello Namra, how are you? I'm not talented, I'm skilled. But thank you for saying that. Is there a tutorial? There's no specific tutorial for what I'm doing. Because I just slowly have been figuring things out about OBS. So I've just joined a bunch of things together. So I very much doubt that you will find a tutorial for how to do what I'm doing right now. But if you're familiar with OBS, I can try to give you an overview of what I've done. If you're not, it's not going to make any sense to you. But basically, I'm feeding. I'm broadcasting from my iPad to my laptop using something. It's a weird Chinese app. It's called Air Screen Mirroring Receiver. Okay, ये मैंने किसी obscure Reddit thread से I found a link to this. So it's got usually ये जो आपके AirPlay mirroring devices होते हैं ना, they're paid. But I found a free app. The only catch is that sometimes it'll show, okay, it'll say unregistered in the feed of the video. Okay, so what I'm doing is I am broadcasting from my iPad to the air mirroring thing, and then that is being mirrored into my OBS, but not into my main scene in the OBS, because then I would have very limited control over it. So what I'm doing is I have that running into a separate scene in OBS, and in my main scene I am broadcasting. I've nestled in the scene from the other scene with this video. उसके अलावा I'm using something called Irium webcam. to broadcast from my phone's camera into my OBS, into my computer, and then I'm mirroring that video into a separate screen into OBS, and then also nestling that window into my main scene. Uske alawa, what else? Yeah. So then I recently I have access to. Not everybody has this, but I have access to be able to go live from my computer. So then what I'm doing is you get a stream key. You see now it says unregistered because this is the free app, so it'll say unregistered for prime time. So then what I'm doing is I am what am I doing? Yeah, so I get the stream key from Instagram. And now here's the thing. Now आपका OBS का जो basic scene होता है ना वो इस तरह का vertical नहीं होता. It's not a vertical scene. It's a horizontal scene. So this is a separate plugin. It's got some Japanese name, and the plugin's name is, what is it? Hold on. No, the Japanese name of course for the multi-streaming. This is called something else. It's called Atrium. It's called Atrium. Atrium creates a separate window for you within OBS that has a vertical video, and then I have to set up the scene for that and like create it on that. So that's how it goes. Alhamdulillah. So like I said, matlab, I just kind of figured this out over a period of months, so that's kind of how I've done this. And I very much doubt that Isna ka specific setup the way I have, I very much doubt that there's a tutorial for that anywhere. You will find tutorials on how to do vertical videos through OBS, but this is a bunch of the stuff I figured out. How is Thailand, Ali Hamza? Are you still there?
I think one of the reasons that online grifts are so intriguing to those of us outside of them is because there's usually two separate levels of sleaze for us to unpick. The schemes themselves are usually pretty scammy. As I mentioned before, there are certainly cases where dropshipping functions as an honest, productive branding service. But let's be honest here, they are few and far between. I was recently trying to buy a new belt for my wedding, and as someone who's always keen to cut down on waste, I wanted to find one that would
make a tutorial video.
But searching for quality leather belt on Google
or an obscure setup by a no-name Instagram guy
generic images,
who's gonna watch that,
discounts, and an overabundance of keyword-heavy descriptions. These sites made big promises for the quality and value of their products. Yet, a quick glance at Trustpilot revealed complaints of inconsistent goods, slow delivery times, and terrible customer service. I don't know whether they ever veered into the realms of illegality, but it was all at least highly dishonest. All of which points us to the second level of sleaze at play here, which is that despite the promises of passive income gurus on YouTube and elsewhere, the vast majority of these schemes don't actually work. Dropshipping sounds so simple and appealing on the surface, but what if your supplier runs out of stock? What if a product gets held up on its very long journey from usually Asia to usually the US or Europe? What if the customer doesn't feel that the dirt cheap product you've sent them lives up to the quality that you promised? This is very quickly going to lead to bad reviews and to complaints. Even more worryingly, it will lead to customers asking their credit card providers to issue chargebacks, which will leave you out of pocket and likely blacklisted by payment processors. All of the schemes that we've been talking about have similar pitfalls. Amazon retail arbitrage is just straight up against the site's terms of service. If you want to advertise goods as new, Amazon will ask you to prove that you've sourced them from official wholesalers as part of their efforts to stamp out fakes. And if you can't, they'll just ban your seller account. Nevertheless, it's not actually this rule breaking which sets online grifts apart from the platform companies we discussed in the previous section. In fact, breaking the law is almost a rite of passage for ascendant platforms. When Uber first launched in Australia, it did so entirely illegally, with none of the required permits or licenses. As it had done in other countries, it simply relied on creating such a buzz that, by the time lawmakers took note, they were essentially forced into retroactively legalizing the company's business model. Facebook's history has similarly been beset with scandals and fines. In 2019, it paid $5 billion to the United States Federal Trade Commission for its lackadaisical approach to sharing user data with third parties. And all of this is before we even begin to talk about the more fundamental ways in which these platforms use their status as intermediaries to circumvent labor laws. The primary difference between the online grift on one hand and the platform on the other, however, is competition. But to explain that properly, I think it's best to hand things back to Margot.
Yeah, I just thought she might have let you go at lunch or something, you know? Like, I liked Little Women, okay? I thought that was good, but she just sounds difficult to work with, that's all. Guess you stuck with me again.
Managed WordPress hosting by Hostinger. Here are 3 super features to improve.
Leave me alone, Hostinger.
Look at the concept of economic rent. And during that section, we focused on what's sometimes called Paretian rent, which is a phrase that economists use to describe what the rest of us might call excess profits. But this particular definition of economic rent is actually kind of controversial. See, as you might economic rent is actually kind of vague. It's one thing to say that it refers to excess profit, but differentiating between an excessive profit and one which is simply very large is often nigh on impossible. If you ask a business owner what percentage of their profit is strictly necessary for them to continue to do business, they're probably gonna say all of it. If we define economic rent merely as excess profit, then it becomes a pretty subjective and therefore not all that useful term. To counteract this vagueness, some economists are a little more selective when it comes to accusing a business or a person of extracting an economic rent. Rather than simply using this term to refer to the vague notion of excess profit, they would argue that a high level of profit is only truly an economic rent in cases where the business or person claiming it is doing so as a result of them having an unfair advantage in the form of significant market power. We might call this definition a Ricardian definition of economic rent, after the 18th century economist David Ricardo. Under this definition, economic rent refers, as Beth Stratford puts it, to unearned income resulting from control of scarce or monopolised assets. Take our example of a landlord from earlier. As we discussed, the rent that a residential landlord charges is an economic rent because it is unproductive. The landlord doesn't have to do anything at all to claim it other than to own the property in question. But it's not simply by chance that landlords are able to extract such exorbitant fees. The reason landlords are able to charge such eye-watering figures is because rooms and flats and houses are an extremely scarce resource. There are usually many more people looking for somewhere to rent in a given town or city than there are properties available at any one time. In such a scenario, the whole justifying logic of capitalism begins to break down, because there isn't any real competition here. That there are always so many more people in need of somewhere to live means that even the smallest, most damp-infested property is going to find a tenant. So why would any landlord ever reduce their asking price? Furthermore, this is not just a scenario from which landlords passively benefit. Many actively work to sustain the state of housing scarcity they profit from. Many landlords will use some of the cash that they take from their tenants and donate it to lobbying groups or directly to politicians in an effort to thwart laws which make it easier to build new homes. These lobbying activities might require them to spend a bit of cash, but it's money which is returned many times over in their ability to push rents even higher. The economic rent extracted by landlords is therefore more than just unproductive excess profit. It is excess profit resulting from extreme scarcity and market conditions in which the idea of competition is a joke. Nevertheless, economic rents of this more precise kind are not confined solely to the housing sector. They exist throughout our economy. Wherever there is a single company or a handful of companies with a stranglehold on a particular market or industry, it is likely that they are using that power to artificially increase prices or drive down costs, and thus claim an economic rent. But that's enough from me, Margot Robbie. To tie all this back into online grifts, I'd better hand you back to Tom.
Get professional email from GoDaddy. Say you receive 2 emails.
I think I'm going to need to order catering. You know, I think she'll expect catering. Platform companies like Uber, DoorDash, Facebook, and Fiverr share a great deal with online grifts. As we've discussed, both business models are focused on the extraction of economic rents. It's all about inserting oneself into an industry or supply chain in such a way that one is able to siphon off as much profit as possible whilst contributing little to no real productive activity. What allows one model to thrive whilst the other so often ends in failure is market share. In short, the most successful platform companies are those which have managed to establish themselves either as monopolies or, at the very least, as part of a small oligopoly of companies. Some have been pretty brazen about this. When Uber fetched a valuation of $100 billion in 2019, it was partly because investors believed that the company had the potential to wipe out all other competition, not only in the form of other ride-sharing companies, but also local taxi firms. The company heavily subsidized fares for years in the hope that once it was the only game in town, it would be able to charge whatever it saw fit. This method has allowed Uber's portion of the ride-sharing market in the US to grow to 74%, while other companies have established similar strangleholds on their own industries. 65% of online food orders in the United States go through DoorDash. 77% of people with access to the internet use at least one platform owned by Meta. Amazon's market share has grown and grown to the point where the site accounted for 56.7% of all US online retail purchases in 2021. That these companies put in vanishingly small amounts of work for the percentages they take then doesn't really matter. They've captured the market, which makes it increasingly difficult not to use them. A restaurant owner might think that DoorDash charging a 30% commission on every order is pretty despicable, but not listing themselves on the site would be a death warrant for their restaurant. The same goes for any newspaper which chooses not to use Facebook, or any video creator who chooses not to use YouTube. Where most passive income seekers fail is that they simply aren't in this monopolistic position. There might have been a period 10 years ago when it was at least possible to make decent money through low-effort dropshipping or affiliate marketing sites. But The internet is too mature now, and there's simply too much competition. Why would someone wait weeks and weeks for a product ordered through your dropshipping store when Amazon will deliver it tomorrow? Ultimately, as has been pointed out by others before me, the only passive income grift which actually works is becoming a fake expert. And what better arena to become an expert in than in selling get-rich-easy schemes? In fact, vanishingly few passive income gurus actually make their money through the business models they promote. This goes as far back as Tim Ferriss. While Ferriss was a moderately successful businessman prior to writing The 4-Hour Workweek, he's fairly open about the fact that he didn't actually implement any of the techniques he promotes in the book until after the business was already off the ground. What's more, the success of that company appears to have largely been a result of being in the right place at the right time. You see, Tim Ferriss made his first $1 million selling brain pills. For a while, this was obviously highly lucrative, but the online supplement market quickly became massively oversaturated. Despite making lofty claims in the 4-Hour Workweek about how much money the company was making and how easy it was to run, Ferriss sold it just 3 years later at what seems to have been a somewhat discounted price. Ferriss is legitimately rich, but it doesn't seem clear that much of that wealth came from actually using any of the techniques he describes in his book. In fact, alongside some timely investments in Uber and other startups, a lot of Ferriss's wealth deals of the 4-Hour Workweek and his subsequent career as a self-help influencer. The same is true of a lot of these figures. Earlier on, I mentioned the British finance guru Mark Tilbury. Tilbury's YouTube channel is packed with videos in which he tries out all kinds of passive income ideas, from dropshipping to selling empty books through Amazon's print-on-demand service. But Tilbury didn't become a millionaire through any of these methods. His actual business experience seems to amount to selling remote-control cars and planes in a fairly standard retail setup.
How do you like the Gollum so far?
But it has precious little in common with any of the so-called side hustles he features on his social media channels. Furthermore, according to his latest company's house filings, Tilbury's YouTube and TikTok channels are currently more valuable than any of the offline businesses he leans on for legitimacy. As with Ferriss, we find that the real money is in recommending these passive income schemes, not in actually undertaking them. Mike Winnett sums all of this up perfectly in the trailer to his documentary, The Entrepreneur Formula Exposed. He compares the current popularity of get-rich-easy schemes to the 1849 California gold rush. And he has this to say on the topic.
Right now there's a gold rush on to be rich and wealthy, but the people who made the real money in the gold rush weren't digging for gold at all. They sold shovels.
It was certainly possible to strike it rich in the gold rush, but that required huge amounts of luck. More stable and methodical success came in the form of companies such as Levi's, who profited from the gold seekers' misplaced optimism by selling them tools and gear. The most obvious modern-day equivalents to those pick, shovel, and clothing companies are the gurus themselves. As we've seen, these figures tell their audience that there's gold in their passive income schemes, but whilst their followers devour hours of inspirational and instructional content in order to learn how to find that gold, it's the gurus themselves who are making the real fortunes, from AdSense, sponsorships, and, in the worst cases, ludicrously expensive courses. What gets less attention are the more mainstream companies, which have also taken it upon themselves to prey on those who have been drawn in by this siren song of passive income. Over the past 6 months or so,
he's ugly but well drawn.
Huge amount of time
Thank you.
investigating the details of various
How's your day?
income schemes. And what shocked me more than anything is the number of times that I've Googled a passive income related keyword and found myself pointed to the website of the e-commerce platform Shopify. Shopify is one of the world's largest e-commerce platforms. It essentially provides companies with a means to quickly and easily add shopping capabilities to their websites. And it's used by some pretty massive companies. Decathlon, the New York Times, Staples, Huel, the Human Fuel. But Shopify also seems to be making a concerted effort to lure in passive income seekers. Their official blog is packed with posts promoting these kinds of business models. Their authors are somewhat more realistic about one's chances of making a fortune than the gurus that we've been looking at. Nevertheless, they're still quite happy to push you to give them a try. Shopify also runs an affiliate program, which many of these gurus participate in. In doing so, they help to fund content which is far more questionable than that which they would likely be willing to host on their own site, whilst retaining a level of plausible deniability about the kinds of advice which are leading people to sign up to their service. Shopify manages to braid together the twin threads of this video in that it is itself a platform company. It makes its money from being an intermediary between sellers and their customers. Whilst few would bemoan their providing of e-commerce capabilities to genuine businesses of various sizes, however, this aspect of the company's activity feels far more ethically dubious. It begins to resemble the pick and shovel play of the gurus, encouraging passive income seekers to take big risks, whilst Shopify collects its reliable monthly fee. In some regards then, it's no surprise that significant numbers of people are drawn to these passive income schemes. On the one hand, the times we live in are pretty bleak. Just as jobs had begun to recover from the Great Recession, we found ourselves battling a pandemic, and then facing rampant inflation, soaring interest rates, and the prospect of another economic downturn. On the other, a huge, well-funded ecosystem has emerged which promises simple solutions to those feeling economically anxious or otherwise under-rewarded for their labour. The self-reinforcing recommendation systems of YouTube and TikTok further mean that one only needs to show the slightest interest in any kind of financial advice for one to be bombarded with this kind of content. But I want to close out this video by exploring some of the less material ways in which these schemes draw people in. Because from what I've seen, the appeal of this community and its practices is as much cultural and experiential as it is solely financial. And it's in discussing this aspect of the passive income trend that we can identify not only what keeps people around after that initial promise of getting rich easy wears thin, but also why those of us outside of these schemes are so drawn in to watching them be debunked and derailed. Clearly, a large part of what draws people into the passive income community is that they genuinely believe it's gonna make them rich. As with buying a lottery ticket or starting a band, there's the tendency to think that even when we know the odds are stacked against us, we're gonna be the exceptions that are gonna make it. But I think part of the attraction, and at least what keeps people trying these schemes, even after it becomes clear that wealth might not come so easily, is the opportunity to roleplay. Being part of the passive income community is a chance for people who lack the connections and capital to ever launch a really successful business to simulate the experience of being a startup founder. As we've seen, there are enough similarities between these passive income business models and those behind some of the largest companies in the world that this might be, at times, pretty convincing. I'm reminded of a quote attributed to John Steinbeck, the author of Mice and Men, which posits that socialism never took root in America because the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. This is actually a bit of a misquote, and it would be more accurate today to refer to billionaires rather than millionaires. Nevertheless, the crux of the idea is that working class people in America have historically tended to identify far more with the super rich than with other working class people. Whether or not this is a real phenomenon is an open question, but there is a certain logic to it. We're told that capitalism is a meritocratic system in which good, hard-working people rise to the top. If you believe this, then you're obviously likely to have a pretty positive view of rich people. But more than this, if you also believe yourself to be good and hardworking,
So now, what are you going to draw?
to believe that your own lack of wealth is.
Well, I'm gonna go to sleep after this.
On the one hand, passive income
I've been around
schemes
for a while.
offer to amend this oversight.
Unfortunately, I would love to spend more time with you.
Restore you to your rightful place among the rich and famous. But when
But
actual
there's this other one.
to materialize, the manner in which these schemes allow passive income seekers to roleplay as Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk at least provides some form of consolation. Guided by their gurus, passive income seekers adopt what they believe to be the language of the super rich, the daily routines of the super rich, the reading lists of the super rich. In this way, they're able to keep proving to themselves and to others within this community that, whilst they might not have the bank balance or fast cars of a billionaire, they at least have the mindset of a billionaire. They might
It looks better in real life.
really be rich, but they are the kind of person who should be rich, were it not for their temporary embarrassment. Passive income seekers might be a pretty obnoxious bunch. They might regularly try to take advantage of others in ways which are neither easy nor necessary to forgive. But their attempts to imitate the successful business models of the super rich are ultimately driven by the same socio-economic trends which have driven the growth of other disconcerting subcultures in recent years. All this elaborate pseudo-business roleplay is simply one further way people have found to cope with the sense that life for ordinary people in the global north is getting worse. A lot worse. And I think these same trends fuel much of the interest in anti-grifter content too. The videos that creators like CoffeeZilla make, highlighting fraudsters and con artists, are obviously important, but these debunkings aren't primarily made for an audience of people who would otherwise have fallen for the scam being featured in a particular video. They're a little bit more voyeuristic than that. The core audience is people entirely outside of these communities who nevertheless love watching gurus and grifters being exposed for what they are. There are no doubt several reasons why we find such videos compelling. Some of the schemes covered in these grift-busting videos are hideous for how they prey on vulnerable and desperate people. But I think there's also an extent to which the roleplay in which passive income gurus and their followers indulge allows us to view them as stand-ins for the more mainstream grifters who run the world's largest companies. The more these wannabes adopt the routines, vernacular, and business models of the super rich, the more we can pretend that they're one and the same. And this provides a different kind of coping mechanism. Because the CEOs and investors behind exploitative platform companies like Uber or Amazon or Facebook profit from all kinds of unethical and unjust practices. Many of us feel their attempts to extract economic rents every day. But a lot of people have come to accept that those CEOs and investors are unlikely to ever meaningfully answer for those actions. I mean, what level of fine would you have to inflict on Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg for them to even notice? In a world where such figures seem untouchable, anti-grifter content allows us a taste of justice. We might not be able to bring down the real rent seekers, but we can at least watch their imitators be torn apart. Again, that's not a bad thing in and of itself. Many of the grifters featured in these videos have taken huge sums of money from deeply vulnerable people. But I think we have to be careful not to be lured into viewing grifts and grifting as something which only exists on the edges of our economy. For despite their often low-rent appearances, the online grift ecosystem is heavily inspired by the practices of decidedly mainstream companies. Increasingly large portions of our economy are predicated on rent-seeking and deception. And we do well to be careful that whilst we're laughing at videos of their small-time imitators being taken down, we're not letting these much larger and much more powerful companies off the hook. I want to talk about one more scam. One that's sitting right beneath our noses. Literally. I'm talking about razors. Modern cartridge razors are a classic.
Ad time, huh?
Shaving companies lure you in with a discounted starter pack, and then once you've committed to using their system, they charge you a small fortune for replacement blades. Before you know it, you're spending vast sums each year on these.
Let's see what this is. What the hell? Okay, it refuses to work.
EVO 2024 was this past weekend, and it gave fighting game fans a lot to get excited about. We saw Titans solidify their grip on a new game, old demons were exorcised, and legends from the past came back to show off for the cameras. In other words, it was awesome. So, what did we learn? EVO is the world's biggest open fighting game tournament, but it's also now part competitive event, part convention. Part of what makes this EVO so exciting is that fighting games seem to be flourishing at a time when the greater esports business landscape is going through a bit of a hard time. More esports orgs are starting to take notice too. For example, last year FlyQuest signed a roster of fighting game players, and now at this EVO, 2 of those players have won the tournaments for their games. On top of that, we got some truly incredible sets that showed us just how deep the competition has become. So let's start with Tekken. Tekken is going through a moment right now, and listen, I'm not saying that the game balance is perfect. Dragunov definitely needs to be nerfed, but this game is popular. And the tournament at this EVO was the biggest Tekken tournament ever, with over 4,600 people signing up to compete. Compare that to when me won Tekken Tag Tournament 2 over a decade ago, and there were only 355 people signed up. Even when Tekken 7 released, it wasn't instantly popular. At its inaugural EVO in 2015, they only had about 458 entrants, and they added only about another 100 the next year. But Tekken 7 did eventually sprout some wings and fly. Part of that was the establishment of the Tekken World Tour, for sure, but it was also these incredible storylines that emerged from within the game itself. But Tekken 8's release was anything but smooth for pro players, who now had to adapt to this game's focus on aggression over evasion. Enter Arslan Ash, the man who is undoubtedly the best Tekken 7 player and whose evasive style changed the way the game was played, but who struggled when Tekken 8 was released. However, after placing 3rd at Boss Gauntlet and then 2nd at Combo Breaker, Arslan was finally able to break through and win a Tier 1 event when he took OTB, a Tekken World Tour event, about a month ago.
2, use the down back 1+2. Underneath the jab. What's the V? And they counted it! Arslan Ash is your only the best 6 champion.
Arslan had been very consistent in Tekken 7, especially in the game's final year, where he achieved the Triple Crown by winning both EVOs and the Tekken World Tour. We wanted to see that consistency in this new game, and Arslan called the shot earlier this year. He believed in his ability to adapt and to win EVO. And against a field of killers, Arslan actually did it. He won his 5th EVO title and unquestionably bridged this gap between Tekken 7 and Tekken 8.
Arslan looking to win another title! Oh, no way! Oh
my god, he's gotta use the rage on! He's gotta use it!
He doesn't, he can't deal with it! No, he got the block!
Arslan Edge!
Evo champion!
I think one key to Arslan's victory was his character pick of Nina. Now, Nina is an old favorite for Arslan, but he wasn't really playing her very much during his heyday in Tekken 7. He seemed especially comfortable playing her against Dragunov, who was absolutely everywhere in this tournament, including the grand finals. Now, from a regional perspective, it was Arslan versus Atif, Pakistan versus Pakistan, in the grand final. Nobi, a 33-year-old Japanese player who actually won that inaugural Tekken 7 tournament in 2015, placed third. Ulsan and South Korea had to settle for fourth, and we even saw Saudi Arabia's Raeth in the top 6. We also got the announcement of Heihachi Mishima as an upcoming DLC character, which for me, I'm gonna be honest, it's pretty meh. I thought he was supposed to be dead. Alright, that's all the time I can devote to Tekken here. Let's get into Street Fighter. We finally got that redemption moment for Punk, who no longer has to be haunted by his 2017 finish against Tokido. Like Arslan, Punk was riding a wave of recent success, having just won CEO 2024. But despite being one of the game's best players for some time, Punk had never won an EVO title for Street Fighter. Sticking with his signature Kami and heading into the bracket on winner's side, Punk was soon swept away by Big Bird and the bracket was reset. But in the final round of this reset match, Punk closed it out.
That could be an Evo losing anti-air. Just like that, Punk. One more hit will do it. Big Bird gets it low, and there it is. Punk gets his retribution, his revenge. He is your Street Fighter 6 Evo champion.
It's really awesome to see a reaction like this, and you can tell that this moment meant a lot to Punk. Punk has changed a lot since 2017 as a player, and one of the great things about EVO is that we're able to keep stock of these kinds of things. Punk also makes history for the United States, who haven't been champions at a mainline Street Fighter title during the modern era of EVO, when competitors from all over the world were consistently traveling to it. We also got to see 17-year-old British phenom Ending Walker place third. He had a great tournament and was both sent to the losers bracket and eliminated by Big Bird. Street Fighter 6 also announced the impending addition of Terry Bogard, and people still seem pretty hyped, even though it had leaked beforehand. EVO also paid homage this year to the 25th anniversary of the release of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike by holding a tournament for it. As I'm sure many of you are aware, this is the game that gave us EVO Moment 37 or the Daigo parry, so it's part of EVO's DNA in a lot of ways. MOV won the tournament playing both Elena and his signature Chun-Li. But the crowd favorite for this tournament was undoubtedly Hayao, whose bombastic Hugo play gave us these golden moments both in the match and on the stage.
Oh my god, no! Okay. Oh my god! How did he do that? He went past the SA3! He went for the roundhouse! He jumped over completely!
I've followed Third Strike for a while, and a lot of the footage you get is just the in-game footage. There's no player cams, it's just a series of highlights or even a single highlight. So to see legends like MOV and Hayao on the stage, it was something really special. Overall, Issei took second place and Chairithi took third. I actually met Chairithi a long time ago at a local, long before I had ever thought about doing this as a job. So it was pretty cool to see him up there on stage. On top of those tournaments, we had official tournaments for Grand Blue Fantasy Rising Versus, Guilty Gear Strive, King of Fighters 15, and Under Night In Birth 2. There were some great sets here too, and it's absolutely worth checking out. I've been playing a little bit of Grand Blue casually, and it's been pretty fun, so it's always great to see how the pros play and what
infinite rank is
Gosh darn
be able to
ads.
see your place in the multiverse.
What exactly they like to do. There's one more EVO tournament that I need to talk about, and that was the tournament for Mortal Kombat 1. Now, this was supposed to be one of the bigger tournaments, but it attracted only 642 entrants. First, let's be clear about something, okay? Mortal Kombat is doing extremely well from a sales point of view. Even recent data supports that, while the game's casual modes seem to be well loved by those same fans. But this was MK1's first year at EVO, and as a competitive game, it just wasn't a huge success. Contrast the attendance this year against 2019, where MK11's tournament had about 2.5 times the entrants. Character diversity in this game has been kind of poor from what I've seen, and whatever you think of the cameo system that was added in this game, it also seems to suffer from that same problem where there's a handful of them that get used. I don't say this stuff to hate on MK. I have fond memories of playing MK2 in the arcade, but I do think this is a big missed opportunity for a game at a time when people seem to be more interested in fighting games than ever. The good news for MK fans is that the developers seemingly do feel like there is an issue, and there's a patch that just released with a ton of balance changes that seem primarily aimed at making way more characters viable. Now to the tournament itself. We got to see Sonic Fox prove, yet again, that they are one of the greatest Mortal Kombat players of all time, and one of the greatest to ever touch fighting games as a genre.
Last breath is active. Fox can absorb 2 more hits. Oh, blockingly jumping. Is this it? Sonic Fox is going to take Evolution once more and be one of the greatest Mortal Kombat players of all time.
It was overall very hard to pick my favorite moment from this tournament, and it's probably one of my favorite EVOs ever. So what about you guys? Was there a game that you kept up with during the tournament that you really enjoyed? Or are there any games that you plan to go back and watch the VODs for now that the tournament is over? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, hit the sub button and ring the notification bell for unique bite-sized videos you won't find.
That Hayao moment was really good.
As of now, Jaden Animations is officially 10 years old. Yes, I know I technically made the channel in February, but shut up, I don't count that. On July 23rd, 2014, I uploaded my first ever animation to YouTube.
Hey everyone, my name is Jaden, and
Alright, that's enough, you get the point. It's kind of old news that a lot of content creators have started retiring, especially after hitting the old 1-0. Making content on YouTube for 10 years has significantly changed the entire trajectory of my life. I started Jaden Animations when I was 16. At the time, I was super shy, quiet, anxious, knew nothing about the world. I could count the number of friends I had on one finger. But not in a sad way, I liked my simple little life. For the longest time, I didn't even realize YouTube had channels or that people were uploading things like vlogs and series and skits. I mean, it was definitely less established at the time compared to now, but I saw YouTube as just the place to watch funny cats and compilations of people getting hit in the crotch. The way I found out about this whole online world was after coming home from school one day to find my laptop not turning on, meaning I couldn't play Minecraft anymore. We've all been there, it's tragic. To satisfy my desperate Minecraft hyperfixation, I typed Minecraft into the YouTube search bar to see if anyone just so happened to upload any Minecraft-related videos. And oh, were there people uploading Minecraft-related videos. My world expanded exponentially at that very moment. YouTube channels, subscribers, people uploading content for an audience that looks forward to their videos. The first channel I ever subscribed to was a Minecraft YouTuber who I don't even, I'm blanking on the name, but I was now aware of YouTube as an actual community beyond funny fail compilations. Watching videos became a huge part of my day-to-day life. I put stuff on when I wanted to relax, laugh, needed background noise. If I was having a tough day, I would lock myself in my bathroom, lay on the floor, and watch videos on my phone, and I'd feel better. Even before making content myself, YouTube was an essential part of my life. I branched out from Minecraft to general gaming videos, even the occasional vlog series, until I stumbled upon a very special video in my suggested feed. An animated story time from a YouTuber called Domix. It was his emails video, I remember it so clearly. After watching it, I immediately binged his whole channel. I loved his animated stories, they made me laugh so much. For the first time ever, I thought to myself, I want to do stuff like that. I want to animate. And around the same time, I was really...
Alright, I think it's time to call it
and had even sent in
done.
fan arts I drew.